it lies. Mountains and mountains of silver, more than enough to make your every wish come true. Here in the Black San Pedro Hills, territory of Arizona, are the riches for which men yearn. Kill, steal, connive, dream of, hope for. Outcroppings of the rich silver ore dot the rocky hills, with discovery awaiting only the sharp blows of the prospector's pick. But the vast stillness of this stark countryside is broken only by the occasional creakings of the wagons of daring settlers, the stealthy sounds of bands of marauding Apaches, the steady parade-like beat of the hooves of horses, of the cavalry from Fort Lowell in tiny Tucson, or from the new outpost of Fort Huachuca. It is fear of the dread Apaches which so far has protected the secret of the treasure-laden hills. And only the brave or foolhardy risk their senseless wrath. Bravery certainly was part of the makeup of full-bearded Ed Shefflin. He probably was a mite foolhardy too. At least the soldiers at lonely Fort Huachuca thought so. All you're going to find is your tombstone, they told him in grim jest when he left the safety of the fort to roam alone through the San Pedros. The year was 1877. On a sloping hill near a flowing spring, Ed Shefflin found his tombstone, a ledge of rock thickly veined with silver ore. This was the discovery which unlocked southeastern Arizona's treasure chest, and this was the name, Tombstone, which ironic Ed Shefflin gave his first discovery, a name destined for worldwide fame, as symbolic of America's last frontier. On a late winter's day in 1878, Ed Shefflin, his brother Al, and mining expert Richard Gerd returned to the Tombstone claim. A few miles up in the hills from the Tombstone claim, Ed noticed an unusual outcropping of rock. He chipped off a piece, found heavy traces of both gold and silver. He followed the vein and discovered a lode so rich in silver that he could force the impression of a $50 into it. The richest sample I've ever assayed, Gerd said. And Ed Shefflin's feelings were expressed in the name given the newest and brightest find, the Lucky Cuss. Other stripes quickly followed: the West Side, Sulphurette, Congress, Mountain Maid, Ingersoll, Gilded Age. During the height of the discovery boom, there were 96 claims recorded in the Tombstone mining district. A cluster of tents and rude shacks sprang up overnight, it almost seemed, in the ravines near the Lucky Cuss location, close to the spring. Watervale it was called, a spring in a valley. But the up and down terrain wasn't suitable for a town, and the optimistic prospectors and early arriving miners and pioneer businessmen knew for a fact a town there had to be. Only appropriate site was an area known as Goose Flats, a couple of miles north of Watervale, a tabletop of land overlooking the Tough Nut claim. Goose Flats was surveyed and a town laid out. Its name? Only one choice, the only appropriate choice, Tombstone. Its principal streets were Allen, Safford, Tough Nut, and Fremont. In the spring of 1879, Watervale was abandoned as the temporary camp's residents and the flocking newcomers settled in the new town on Goose Flats. In December of 1879, Frederick Werfritz, with supreme optimism in Tombstone's future, built the dominating two-story brick and stone Golden Eagle Brewery at the corner of 5th and Allen Streets, the tiny town's busiest intersection. The name soon was changed to the Crystal Palace Saloon. In the same month, the stables of the OK Corral were built, with a narrow rear entrance off Fremont Street. It was this Fremont Street entrance, just a step from 3rd Street, which was to become the most famous and infamous strip of land in the violent history of the Old West. By the early summer of 1881, the center blocks of Tombstone were crowded with buildings. The Grand Hotel had been built on Allen Street near 5th. A row of offices on 4th Street between Tough Nut and Allen irreverently was known as Rotten Row because so many lawyers were quartered there. The Methodists, Presbyterians, and Catholics had their own church buildings, and nearing completion on the corner of 4th and Fremont was a monument to the man whose determination, perseverance, and of course luck was responsible for the presence of these buildings and the people who lived, worked, and played in them. Shefflin Hall, largest adobe building in the United States, built by Al Shefflin to honor his brother Ed. The frantic building boom on the wane, Tombstone could relax and draw a deep breath. But when a breath was drawn, it was one acrid with smoke. 2 bartenders were trundling a barrel of condemned whiskey out of the Arcade Saloon just above the Oriental on Allen Street when it exploded. Instantly the arcade was a mass of flames, which swept 2 square blocks, spreading north to Fremont and south to Tough Nut. In just about an hour, until the fire reached empty lots it couldn't leap, 66 stores, restaurants, saloons, and business houses were destroyed. Loss, $175,000. But the next morning, the telegraph office was crowded with merchants, ordering new stocks. Rush. Rebuilding already was underway. It was the start of the legend of the town too tough to die. Much of Tombstone's notoriety centers around or stems from the activity of the tall, somber, reserved Wyatt Berry Stapp Earp, who rode into town December 1st, 1879, accompanied by, or soon followed by, his brothers Virgil and Morgan, his friends Bat Masterson, Doc Holliday, Luke Short. Up in the San Pedro Valley, N.H. Clanton, known always as Old Man, even on his eventual grave marker, ran a ranch which was a headquarters for men not too particular about the brand on the cattle they sold. His right-hand man, the real boss, some said, was rough, tough Curly Bill Brocious. Curly Bill liked to have a little fun when he hit town and didn't much care for chaperones. One clear October night in 1880, Curly Bill, probably as full as his target, started shooting at the moon. Town Marshal Fred White demanded Curly Bill's gun. The outlaw held it out to him, and the marshal dropped, fatally wounded from a single shot. Wyatt Earp, who had heard the disturbance, ran up and struck Curly Bill sharply over the head. Wyatt and his brothers threw Curly Bill in jail, along with his fellow marksmen, Old Man Clanton's sons Ike and Billy, and the McLaury brothers among them. The short fuse really started to burn when 3 masked men tried to hold up the Vincent stage. The driver was killed, so was a passenger. The would-be robbers got away. Sheriff John Behan and the Tombstone Nugget, which supported the cowboys, intimated Doc Holliday was one of the mob. Charges and countercharges flew thick and fast around town. The Earps and the Clantons quarreled frequently, openly. So it was to be, as inevitable as the climax of a Greek tragedy, that blood would spill when next the Earps and the Clantons met. Their meeting place, the OK Corral. Friends of the Clantons and McLaury said the brothers were ready to leave town, that Ike Clanton and Tom McLaury were unarmed, that the Earps deliberately sought a fight. The Earps, and they had witnesses too, said the Clanton group was spoiling for a fight, that the Earps went to the corral to do what the sheriff had failed to do, disarm troublemakers. In any event, the climactic moment is here. Three look-alike Earp brothers and consumptive Doc Holliday purposefully stride down Fremont Street to confront their enemies. Sheriff Johnny Bean, friend of the Clantons, enemy of the Earps, is talking to the men waiting in the corral. He comes back to meet the Earps, tells them he will disarm the Clanton group, but the Earps keep going into the corral lot beside Fly's photo gallery. Tempers and emotions have reached the fever pitch. Don't you be up here! Right. To 19-year-old Billy Clanton and Frank and Tom McClory, it didn't make much difference. Seconds after the battle started, they lay fatally wounded on Tombstone's sandy earth. Frank and Tom sprawled on Fremont Street. Billy carried dying into the small building on the corner. Virgil and Morgan Earp were wounded, but they recovered that time. Wyatt Earp, the Lion of Tombstone, according to some historians, the terror of Tombstone, to others equally vehement, was a marked man. So were his brothers, as also were any who had been in the forefront in defense and support of the Earps. In December, there was an attempt to assassinate Mayor John P. Clum, editor of the Tombstone Epitaph, and strong advocate of the Earps and the Earp brand of justice. Hatred, suspicion, and fear racked the town too tough to die. Just 2 weeks later, Virgil Earp, crossing 5th Street toward the Crystal Palace, was the target of 5 shots from out of the darkness. 3 shots tore through a Crystal Palace window and lodged in the opposite wall. 2 struck Virgil, leaving him a partial cripple. On March 18, 1882, while playing pool in Campbell and Hatch's billiard parlor on Allen Street, Morgan Earp was shot to death. Wyatt nearly was hit. A coroner's jury fixed the blame on Frank Stillwell, who had divided his time between stagecoach robberies and service as the deputy sheriff of Cochise County. And later, Wyatt Earp shot Stillwell to death in the Tucson train yard when he saw Stillwell stalking around the train which was carrying Morgan's body to California for burial. A few days later, with warrants for the murder of Frank Stillwell sworn out against them, the Earps and Doc Holliday rode out of town for Colorado. The Earp era in Tombstone ended on March 23, 1882. Tombstone had been in turmoil for months because of the enmity between the Earps and the cowboy faction. The bloody events of the winter finally forced into action the by now greatly perturbed territorial and Washington officials. President Chester A. Arthur threatened to send federal troops to Tombstone unless law and order were restored. And whether because of the threat of invasion by the U.S. cavalry or because several of the outlaw leaders had been killed by the Earps, Tombstone did settle down. In June of 1881, the magnificent Sheffield Hall was completed and soon was to become the social, civic, cultural, and theatrical center of the town. On December 5th, the first professional troupe, the Nellie Boyd Dramatic Company of New York, presented The Banker's Daughter, and for years thereafter, Tombstone was a regular stop for top theatrical companies, playing the New York, Chicago, Denver, San Francisco circuit. By February 1881, a new county was formed, stretching all the way from east of Benson to the Mexican border. It was named Cochise, after the now dead, now harmless Apache chief. Naturally, the county seat was Tombstone, fastest growing town in the West. Some said it ought to be made the capital of the whole Arizona Territory right then. Why wait? A county courthouse and office building, 2 stories of brick grandeur built at a don't spare the horses cost of nearly $50,000 was completed on Toughnut Street. You can see it today, restored to original condition several years ago by the citizens of Tombstone. In the same month, the courthouse was finished, December of '82. The City Hall, just across the street from Shefflin Hall, was finished too. Then, as today, the badly needed building housed the fire department and city offices. And recording on film all the fantastic, dramatic, sometimes almost unbelievable sights and personalities of the incredibly chaotic yet contrastingly communal life of Tombstone was the indefatigable frontier photographer Camillus S. Fly. He built a boarding house and small photography studio on Fremont Street, next to the narrow strip of land where the Earps and Clantons blazed away at each other in the OK Corral gun battle. You can see it today, just as it was, with many of Fly's strikingly interesting photographs on display. After the feared Geronimo, weary of pursuit and with his supporters dwindling, offered to surrender, Camillus Fly accompanied the cavalry to the storied Indians' headquarters and busily photographed the chieftain, his braves, their women and children. By 1882, mining really was booming. More than $5 million in silver was taken from the mines, which by now crisscrossed the land south of town and even tunneled under the town itself. But 1882 was a year of tragedy for Tombstone too, when again fire broke out in an Allen Street saloon, quickly spread up and down and across the business district, leveling virtually every building from below 5th Street to 4th and Toughnut across the south side of Fremont. And again within a month, Tombstone was rebuilt, its buildings larger, sturdier, more pretentious, more gaily decorated. Tombstone really was proving itself this time the town too tough to die. But little heed was paid to the portents of the greatest tragedy, the greatest despair, which already were becoming apparent. Tiny trickles of water seeping out of underground earth, pushing their way around underground rocks, forming larger and larger, deeper and deeper puddles on the earthen floor. Miners sinking a shaft below the 500-foot level of the sulphurette mine had hit water as early as March 1881. The sulphurette hoist pulled out the water in 50-gallon buckets, 1,000 gallons an hour. Mining continued as experts sagely agreed the water proved the permanency of the veins and looked forward to building stamping plants right beside the mines. But rushing, swirling water is hard to ignore. The problem got worse. By 1884, the chug-chug-chug of the pumps in the larger mines was Tombstone's metronome, a rhythmic pulse beat essential to keeping the town alive. Production figures edged back towards where, as everyone knew, they should be and soon would be. But then, early one May morning in 1886, despairing Tombstone residents watched in weeping helplessness as fire, bursting forth in a draft-fed roar, destroyed the pump house and hoisting works of the Grand Central mine. These pumps were destroyed, and the pumps of the contention mine, not big enough, not strong enough to keep both the giant Grand Central and contention free of water, were shut down. The town was quiet as a tomb, and tomb it almost appeared to be as miners, businessmen, and camp followers left by the thousands. As the ore wagons of the freighters, some say as many as 75, left in a body, an endless caravan for the Congress mine northeast of Phoenix. A doleful journey which started down now empty Allen Street. But the music to Tombstone's ears, the chugging tempo of the pumps, was to have one encore. Shortly after the turn of the century, a combination of investors took over the larger mines and moved in huge 1,500-gallon pumps powered by 200 horsepower boilers. A carload of fuel oil a day was needed to keep the pumps pounding out the sounds that said Tombstone was alive again. Incredibly, impossibly, but in tragic actuality, a tank car supposedly containing fuel oil to keep the chugging pumps alive and the water under control was found to contain not life-sustaining oil, but in further irony, plain salt water. The boilers died. The pumps at the crucial 1,000-foot level were submerged, never reached again. The mining company, born in hope, died in despair. For all time, the pumps fell into ghostly silence. Mining was over. Gone and seemingly quickly forgotten were the days when Tombstone streets were as crowded throughout shadowy nights as during sun-blazing days. Tombstone, while still alive, was a crippled, emaciated shell of its once vibrant self. And the epitaphs in the newspapers of the nation were many and varied, but all told one mournful, unanswerable requiem when in 1929, the county seat, Tombstone's only remaining reason for existence, was moved to Bisbee. Now obviously and at last, Tombstone, the once flamboyant, lusty town, which epitomized the Old West at its very best and very worst, was indeed doomed. But as you know, Tombstone didn't die. Almost, perhaps by a predestined miracle, Tombstone lives. A town which is truly a museum which has remained a vibrant, high-spirited town. And now as you roam these ageless streets, side by side with the dauntless ghosts of Wyatt Earp, Ed Shefflin, Doc Holliday, Nellie Cashman, Curly Bill, Billy Clapp, Dick Gerd, and the hordes of others, good and bad, and sometimes a mixture of both, you too now know why Tombstone will always be the town too tough